Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for being here and for listening to this additional talk here about waste management. Again, we have here a Mentimeter for anyone that would like to ask questions along the way. Of course, you can always raise your hand as well and ask your questions. I'll just give a few seconds for that. Okay. All right, so let's jump straight into it. Basically, for this half an hour, I would like to give an opportunity to try to imagine what it looks like to be in the regulator shoes. Who are the regulator of waste management in Singapore, and what do they have to decide and to choose when it comes down to improving waste management to Singapore? Okay, just for a quick introduction, so my name is Rémi. As Anna has mentioned, I am a founder and director of Zero Waste City. We are a consulting business based here in Singapore, and we basically work mostly in relation to resource use efficiency. The way I like to joke about it is I am a professional dumpster diver because we literally do waste audit. We literally open the garbage bags to see what's inside and to do the sorting. Anyway, so basically my experience around here and my experience around here is what justifies me here today to talk about regulatory compliance in Singapore. So let's talk about it. Who is a regulator of waste management to Singapore? So I'm going to talk about three quick things here. The number one is MSE, the Ministry of Sustainability and the Environment. This is a minister that is in charge of the policies to be implemented in Singapore in the coming years and in the long-term future. Under MSE, you have several statutory boards: PUB, NEA, MSS, and SFA. All of those are directly dependent on the decision made from the Ministry of Sustainability and Environment. Now, the one statutory board I'm particularly interested in here to talk about is NEA. Now, NEA also had a wide range of responsibilities that they have to work with. We go from the public health standards, agriculture, safe, healthy, and conducive living environment, sustainable and resource efficient Singapore, and finally, timely and reliable weather and climate services. So one services I'm particularly interested in within this statutory board is this one. In the website, it clearly states that we plan, develop, and manage a solid waste management system in Singapore and strive toward a zero-waste nation by promoting circular economy and 3 Rs, reduce, reuse, recycle, practices to conserve resources. So, this is NEA. NEA is a regulator. It's effectively the administrator of the waste management to Singapore. So, just to mention here, they plan, they develop, they manage, they don't operate. The operation of waste management is to be done by the private sector into Singapore. But basically, they will supervise, oversee, and control and frame what companies can or cannot do in Singapore. As the administrator, as the effective executive arm of MSC, they are the one to implement policies that are being defined by the government. So the government will define what visions they want to set for Singapore in terms of operation and practices. There are two particular frameworks and roadmaps that I would like to mention. The first one here is the Zero Waste Master Plan. The Zero Waste Master Plan was published in 2019 and had a few very specific targets, commitments made by the government. 70% recycling rate overall, 30% recycling rate from the domestic sector, 81% recycling rate from the non-domestic sector, 30% reduction in waste going to landfill, and finally, the implementation of an EPR scheme, Extended Producer Responsibility Framework for managing packaging waste, including plastic, no later than 2025. No. So all of these targets here, oh, sorry, I should have mentioned it. All of these targets here are for 2030, and this one only is for 2025. Yes?
Sorry, Remy. This is just if you have signed up for the interactive dialogue with Fashion Pulpit and Better Futures, it's happening now. So if you have signed up for that, don't forget to go.
Thank you, Rachel. Yes.
Exactly.
2 years later, right during COVID, post-COVID, kind of, the 2030 Green Plan was also published. This one has a much, much broader spectrum of commitments to the life in Singapore, not just waste. But among waste, we have these additional targets for 2025, 2026, and 2030. Spoiler alert, some of them are never going to be achieved, not at least in the time frame that they promised. This one is already too late. It was supposed to happen in 2024, but got delayed, any reason why. Those things, some of them might actually happen, others I'm not so convinced. So let's have a look. What are we talking about when we talk about waste management? First thing first, we usually refer to 3 separate sectors within waste management. So when we talk about waste management in a city, like Singapore, you have the construction and demolition, typically referring to anything related to construction and demolition of buildings. So that's typically where you find all the concrete aggregate or the asphalt from the road, and so on. You have the non-domestic sector, which also refers to commercial and industrial, and you have the domestic sector, typically referring to residential sector. Now, how does that look like? 2023, you have about 12% construction demolition, 60% commercial industrial, and about 28% from the residential sector. So, what happened? Singapore is very proud to say that they recycle close to 100% of the waste from construction demolition. In other words, all the metal frames or the concrete aggregate will get reused to make new landfilling, typically, operations. On the non-domestic sector, typically your shopping malls, office buildings, hotels, and all the industries, they achieve about 60% recycling rate overall. And then we have the very, very sad and pitiful 12% of recycling rate from the domestic sector. Now, just FYI, this has not always been the case. 5 years ago, for about 10 years, the recycling rate was about 20% for domestic sector. And it just started to drop 5 years ago. Unfortunately, I won't have the time to explain the reason behind. So overall, we have about 7 million tons of trash in Singapore every single year, and about 52% recycling rate overall. So I did mention a few targets from the Zero Waste Master Plan. Do you remember what they are? We have about 70% recycling rate overall, 30% over here, and if you do the calculation, you have about 77% recycling rate from commercial and industrial. Those targets are for 2030. Can we achieve it? Well, I mean, this one I'm not particularly optimistic. This one could happen. I think I believe in this one. This one, I don't think so.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Under your non-domestic,
Yes.
because Singapore is an island,
Mhm.
there are lots of ships
Yes.
coming, to load, unload, etc. And as a result, there are lots of waste floating around the waters.
Mm-hmm.
How much of that do you think is in the numbers?
Okay. So you're typically referring to all the waste from cruise ship, cargo ship that will come and discard.
The waters of Singapore,
Yeah.
the
Okay.
rivers and all that. Yeah.
Okay. So we don't have numbers. Okay, I definitely don't have.
Plastic also.
Yes. Okay, definitely in terms of leakage into the environment, we don't have numbers officially published, but NE have actually mentioned several times that the amount of leakage into the environment is actually extremely small, because Singapore do have several measures to capture all the waste before it flows to the sea. You may have noticed some of the waste barriers on the rivers of Singapore, which are there to capture the waste before it reaches the sea. So the leakage into the environment is actually very small. Now, as for the wastage coming from cruise ship or cargo ship coming into Singapore, we know it exists, but we also know it's actually very small, because it's mostly referring to waste from individuals. And Singapore right now, it's about 1 kilogram of trash per person, average. And you can basically assume something a bit similar for cruise cargo ship, which don't have a lot of crew team. So the volume is actually small compared to the rest. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Could you elaborate which is the origin of this pollution in the ocean around Singapore?
So, sorry.
Could you elaborate a bit more about the origin of this
Oh, elaborate more.
plastic bottles around Singapore?
I mean, I do have a few clues, but I don't have numbers or exact quantification. Yes. Okay, so in terms of the waste of Singapore, you have all the waste will typically come from domestics, like individuals that will basically throw a bottle into the river and so on. Those are, of course, illegal, and you do have, as I've mentioned, a few preventive measures to capture those leakage before it reaches the sea. On the commercial industrial sector, NEA is extremely severe on anyone dumping waste on the roadside as part of the business. There are a few cases that are all published on the NEA website where they fine small businesses owner $70,000 for dumping 2 tables on the side of the roadside because they don't want to pay for waste collector. Finally, you have in Singapore, and particularly the outer layer of Singapore, waste that will typically come from contamination of overseas. Typically, Malaysia don't have the same level of capture of waste from the Johor rivers, which contribute to wastage happening on the shore, on the coastline. Then you have the waste also from the marine current, typically happening from Indonesia, Malaysia, and beyond. But this one, I don't know how consequential it is. Yeah.
It's interesting that you just said that, because I see a lot of plastic bottles
Yeah.
in the Northeast seas, like a lot.
Yeah, but this one will be mostly related to the Johor River, yes, actually. Okay, so back to our thing over there. So we are here with our flow of waste, and I don't have the time to explain, but what is stressing out a lot of the government right now is this thing here, Semakau landfill. Semakau landfill is the last place where the ultimate ashes of your incinerator or non-incinerable waste goes to. And currently, the expected lifespan of this Semakau landfill is only 11 years from now, which means that by 2035, we don't know where to send the trash to. And no one likes to import or export trash. So once Singapore has this landfill full, what's going to happen? And that is actually a very, very serious issue for Singapore. They are considering quite a few things to mitigate this timeline. But I don't know, I really have no clue what's the plan B. Once it's full, basically it will get full at some point. I just don't know. So in the meantime, I will tell you about a few things that are being done to mitigate waste going to the Semakau. So here's a breakdown of what actually is burnt every day. You have about 28% of plastic, a quarter of paper and cardboard, 20% of food, textile, and then everything else. Okay, I just would like you to imagine a little bit what this thing here, the paper one. We're talking about, if I remember correctly, we're talking about 3,000 tons of waste every single day of paper, which is about like a few thousand cars that are worth of paper that are basically dumped into a burning furnace just to get rid of it. It's huge. It's absolutely colossal. So Singapore need to find a way to minimize all of this. And they have implemented a few policies that will help to stop or reduce the likelihood of those waste to go there. Singapore made a commitment in its 2 roadmaps, the Waste Master Plan and the 2030 Green Plan, is to focus on e-waste, packaging, and food waste. Now you might wonder why we're even talking about e-waste. It was not even in my chart. Yes, e-waste is actually extremely small. However, it has 2 main reasons why it's of interest here. Number one, because it has very, very high potential for toxicity. If you don't manage e-waste properly, it's a lot of very complex type of chemical compound that you might release into the environment or into the air. So minimizing it in the first place is by far one thing you really want to do. And also, there's a huge value. A ton of e-waste is worth more than a ton of dirt in a gold mine. You have more gold in a ton of e-waste than you have amount of gold in a gold mine. So if you want to open a gold mine, just open an e-waste company. So let's talk about the regulation. The RSA, the Resource Sustainability Act, is definitely a landmark legislation that has been introduced into Singapore in 2019. It has been updated already. So 2019, you had EPR on e-waste, MPR, mandatory packaging reporting, mandatory food waste segregation. 2023 is introduced a disposable carrier bag charge that you probably all notice now when you go to Fair Price or Costa, you have to pay 5 cents for every bag you purchase. This is where it comes from. And you have now the beverage container return scheme, which will come into effect in 2026. So I will go quickly through all of them. Please tell me if I'm going over time. I will go through all of them here, try to give you a bit of a clue as to what they actually mean. Now, EPR, we're going to be talking a lot about it now, and we will talk about it in the panel discussion later. So let me tell you what an EPR is about. Here is a basic idea of who is paying for waste management. When I go to cold storage or I go to Fair Price, I purchase goods that are being supplied by a producer, I will consume it and then discard it. Right now, I am paying for it when you pay your tax, not your taxes, but in your utility bills, you will have a line for waste collection. This is effectively designed or supervised at least by the government. I will then go to the waste management company to effectively have a truck to come to your house and pick up the garbage. But the question here is it fair for consumer to be the one to pay for it? Why is they not paying for it? They are the one to design the packaging. They are the one to market it to you. They are the one to supply it to the market. And they are the one to maybe make a packaging which is not recyclable at all. So why should they not pay for it? This is the idea of an extended producer responsibility. Right now, when I purchase a good from a brand, but the brand is not responsible for what I'm going to do with the waste afterward. But should they? And this is where an EPR comes into play. The basic idea of an EPR is to extend the responsibility of a producer beyond the point of sale, to make them responsible for the cost associated with the management of the waste that they contributed to generate. And the basic idea here is to basically make them pay for it or to organize the physical collection of the waste from their own goods. So that's the basic idea. Now, you have many ways to design an EPR scheme. I will talk about two of them, but this is like the basic concept. So let's talk about e-waste first. What has been done for e-waste? So right now, it's about 60,000 tons every year of e-waste which are being generated in Singapore. Now, to give you an idea of what it looks like, it's the same amount, the same weight than 210 A380 every single year worth of e-waste. Now, when you want to know, okay, so it's not very easy to read, I guess. About a third of it is just washing machine, refrigerator, about a quarter of it. Then you have TVs, about a quarter, and then you have everything else. All the small items like mobile phones, printers, computers, those are just a few % of the total amount of e-waste. Singapore has already enforced an EPR scheme on e-waste. So this one came in 2021. So as I mentioned, the basic idea here is that companies that supply regulated electronic goods are financially responsible for the management of the and handling of the waste resulting from the use and disposal of electronic goods. Basic idea, any single company that import and then sell electronic goods have an obligation to report to the government how much packaging, how much goods, they are bringing to the market. They have to work with the PRS operator to ensure the suitable management of the waste, and they have to pay the relevant fee. Since it has been implemented, the government has said that it has increased by a factor of 3 the amount of e-waste that was previously recovered for recycling. Now, the way you may have noticed a change in your day-to-day life is when you go to supermarket, now you almost always have a big bin for e-waste. And this is where it comes from. So now it's a legal obligation for companies to have this type of collection point in the retail stores. Okay, how about food waste? Food waste is a big part, so we are talking about 750,000 tons every year. It is basically your top 3 biggest item which is being incinerated. Now, food waste is an absolute nightmare for incinerators because they actually make burning a lot harder because effectively food waste is mostly water, and water does not help with combustion inside a furnace. 17% is actually already recycled in Singapore, but it's mostly from industrial premises. So one thing which is interesting to know is that 40% of all this food waste is actually from commercial industrial. Now, what are we doing about it? This is something I'm actually very kind of excited about, which is a mandatory food waste segregation. It was supposed to start early this year, but there have been no communication from the NEA, so I'm not even sure it's being enforced, which is a bit annoying. But anyway, here's the basic idea. If you operate any of those businesses, a shopping mall, a hotel, a single-user food factory, or multi-user food factory that match any of those thresholds over here, then there are these 3 specific obligations you have to comply with. Number 1, occupiers, the tenant, the operator, must segregate food waste and dispose it in allocated facilities. Building managers must provide premises to facilitate the disposal, the separation of food waste. And finally, the building manager must ensure that food waste will get recycled either on-site or off-site. As a consumer, you will probably not notice those things. Those are actually more in the back end of the stall owners, stall operators of the food courts, typically. And the RSA actually defines some pretty heavy fines for not complying with any of those 3 obligations. Again, I've not seen any communication from the NEA, so I don't know if anything has been enforced in any way yet. Plastic. So plastic waste is the number 1 item over here in terms of what is being incinerated, and it's by far the best fuel of your incinerators. Of this particular amount of waste, we have the PET bottle that everybody knows of. Now, just for you to know, PET bottles is a very, very, very small component of your plastic waste in Singapore. It's barely 1% of the total amount of plastic waste. In your plastic waste here, you've got plastic bags, you've got like anything related to plastic, like containers and so on. The first thing that is going to happen, and you will all notice it if ever you continue to buy plastic bottle by 2026, is that we are going to have a deposit return scheme, or how they call beverage container return scheme. It will start in April 2026. It was supposed to be the very first EPR policy to come into play in Singapore for plastic, but that has been delayed. It will impact every company that supply pre-packaged beverages in plastic and metal container, so aluminum cans are included, ranging from 150 milliliter to 3 liter. So if you are supplying any of those beverage goods in plastic or metal, within those volumes, you will have to comply with it. Okay, yeah. So you will have to register as a member, you will have to report the quantities, and pay the relevant fees. A company has already been set up. It's a non-for-profit, the BCRS Limited, which is actually co-founded by Coca-Cola, FNN, and Poca. So these big players of the beverage industry are co-owning this organization that will be supervised by the NEA. The basic idea is that you as a consumer, you go to the retail store and you buy your beverage good exactly the way you will normally do. But you will also pay a deposit fee. So you're basically paying an extra for every single bottle you purchase. You go home, you consume it, you return the empty bottle, and the money you already initially paid here will be given back to you. So this is by far the most powerful form of EPR schemes that that institution can actually implement to force and incentivize the behavior of consumers to return packaging. Some countries are able to achieve stratospheric performance, like Germany, where they got like a 20 cents, euro cents per bottle. They have, I think, a 95% return rate, which is brilliant. In Singapore, it would be 10 cents, I think. Okay, and just to finish quickly on the packaging waste. So packaging waste is 1/3 of all the waste, which is mostly plastic and paper. The recycling rate is down the drain for plastic for many reasons. I don't have the time to explain, unfortunately. And we have about 1/3 of recycling rate on the cardboard and paper. So back to here. I've mentioned just a few policies. Now there are quite a few more things that are being done by the NEA in terms of infrastructures to facilitate this whole transition here. But so far, those are some of the 3 main policies that aim to address the top 70% of the waste which are currently being discarded into the incinerator of Singapore. In terms of performance, during the panel discussion, we might actually talk about the EPR on e-waste to see how successful it has been. In terms of food segregation, I have not yet seen any success because any communication on this, so I cannot really tell you. As for the EPR on packaging, it can be a massive success as well as it can be a massive failure. There have been a lot of EPR schemes all around the world, Europe, US, also in Asia. Now, some EPR schemes are very successful. They really are built in a way that it will help the whole ecosystem to operate in a better way, both from the producer and the waste management perspective. But yes, we also have schemes which have just end up being just one more fee that companies have to pay without meaningful change.